approximately 800,000 troops, yet the Empress demands I surrender them. To apologize to the Empress, I had the eunuch she sent as her envoy executed on the spot. You say I'm just a vase? I challenge you. Even for 800 men, I'd have to weigh whether it's worth the choice. Comparing military strength, if I have an army of 800,000, wouldn't I be invincible? Why not rebel? It turns out I've transmigrated into a world dominated by women. In this world, the emperor is female, and half the court officials are women. The status of men has plummeted. Handsome men are called male beauties and hold high status, adored by all, while someone like me is seen as a guard in the eyes of the capital's elite. Yet, I spent 7 years training my 30,000 remnants into an 800,000 strong iron army, reclaiming the 13 northern provinces from the northern barbarians with blade and spear. In 7 years, I beheaded 100 enemy generals and conquered countless cities. The northern barbarians tremble at the mere mention of my name. With such illustrious war merits, she demands I hand over my military power just because I slapped her favorite male concubine. I've already sought to repent, and if not for the late emperor's kindness in raising me, I would have rebelled long ago. But the late emperor has been dead for 3 years now, and every action this young girl has taken since ascending the throne has exhausted my patience. This imperial decree is the final straw. Inside the military tent, I sit in the main chair, a cup of steaming spirits before me, tapping my fingers rhythmically on the armrest. The tent flap is pulled open, a gust of wind and snowflakes swirling in as a female official marches in, followed by 4 female guards wielding blades. Her stride is steady, chin tilted up. Having stayed in the capital, she's used to looking down on others. She glances at the tent's layout, the battle-worn armor on the walls, the military maps piled on the desk, and the blood-stained long blade in the corner, and her brow furrows almost imperceptibly. By the grace of the Fengcheng Emperor, Prince Mo, you have insulted an imperial official. Your behavior is arrogant, a capital offense. However, considering your contributions at the border, we shall not delve deeper. Yet while the death penalty is waived, punishment is unavoidable. You are ordered to depart for the capital immediately, surrender your command of the 800,000 Mo troops, and apologize to the insulted party in the court before all the civil and military officials.
I set down my wine glass and the corner of my mouth curled up slightly. As he finished the final word, his gaze fell upon me, looking down from above.
Prince North, step forward and receive the decree. The hall was silent. The charcoal in the brazier crackled with a sudden pop. I didn't move. I just sat there, my right hand resting on the armrest. The silence lasted for about 10 breaths. Then the female official's expression began to change, and her tone rose a notch.
Prince North, are you refusing to accept His Majesty's imperial decree? I put down the cup and stood up. I am 6 feet 3 inches tall, which is quite imposing in this world. As I stood, my black cloak unfurled with the movement, and the official instinctively took a half step back. I walked up to her and reached out, thinking I was going to accept the decree. A flash of triumph crossed her face. I took it, and then, under her gaze and that of the 4 guards, I spread the decree out and read it from beginning to end once more. Well written. The phrasing is smooth and the choice of words is precise. Quote, before I finished speaking, I exerted force with my fingers, and the decree was torn right down the middle.
You. The official's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets.
Prince North, you've gone mad. You dare tear up His Majesty's decree? This is treason. Quote, treason is too heavy a word. A mere official like you isn't qualified to pin such a label on me. Quote, go back and tell Marwang Huan 3 things. First, my military power was earned by me, inch by inch, with blade and spear. It wasn't a gift from him. If he wants it, let him come and take it himself. Quote, second, as for that man of his, not only did I slap him, but I'll hit him again next time we meet. A creature who relies on his looks shouldn't be chirping at me. Slapping him is getting off easy. Quote, third, I set the cup down, my gaze suddenly turning icy cold. Tell him I remember the late emperor's kindness toward me, but if he keeps courting death, even the late emperor's favor won't be enough for him to squander. The official was frozen in place by my stare, her lips trembling.
Prince North, you'd better think clearly. If you dare defy the decree, His Majesty will surely execute your entire clan. Quote, the words entire clan felt like a blunt blade. It wasn't sharp, but it hurt to be stabbed by it. My parents died at the hands of the northern barbarians, and my brothers died there too. My entire clan was wiped out in that catastrophe 7 years ago. I am the only one left of the Chen family. When the old emperor gave me the title of Prince North, it was less of a reward and more of a contract for my life. You guard the north for me, and I will let you avenge the Chen family. It's been 7 years. I've avenged my grievances. The borders are stable, and I've beaten the northern tribes into submission for a decade. Then his daughter tells me that because I killed her favorite male servant, she's going to wipe out my entire family. My entire family. How laughable. My family is on Earth, so you'll never be able to find them. However, I draw the blade from my waist, its edge shimmering with a cold glint in the firelight. Your words have made me very unhappy. The female official's face turns pale instantly, her body trembling uncontrollably. I strike with the blade, swift and decisive, without a single wasted movement. Her body stiffens for a moment, then falls forward like a wooden stake, blood splattering onto the scattered fragments of the imperial decree. The 4 female guards turn deathly pale, vomiting on the spot. I wipe the blood from my blade on the official's robe and slowly sheath it, drag her out and bury her. My personal guards, waiting outside the tent, rush in and efficiently carry away the corpse. I sit back down and say to the 4 trembling female guards, you 4 will go back alive and relay the 3 things I say to Mu Rongwan, word for word. Tell him, ask him whether his imperial decree is harder, or if my blade is sharper. Go. After the 4 female guards flee in a panic, the great tent falls silent once more. I sit in the main seat, staring at the bloodstains on the floor that haven't yet dried, my thoughts drifting back to 2 months ago. It was my first return to the capital in 7 years. They called it a return for a report, but it was just the same old trick. The court wanted to see if I, a frontier general holding heavy military power, was still obedient. On the first day, Mu Rongwan sat on the dragon throne, but as I looked at him, my mind was on what his father said while holding my hand on his deathbed. I am entrusting Huan to you. He is self-willed, but his heart is not evil. Please look after him and assist him. Quote, I knelt before the throne and agreed, but the old emperor likely never imagined that 3 years after Mu Rongwan took the throne, he would replace 6 chancellors and exile over a dozen officials. There are fewer people in court who dare to speak the truth and more who only know how to flatter, but none of that has anything to do with me. I'll stay in the capital and listen to the young emperor. As long as he doesn't bother me, I'll quietly remain the king of Mo. Trouble started on the second day. I was eating alone quietly at an inn when a man walked over. He wore a moon-white robe and looked more delicate than a woman, with a jade belt around his waist. This was Yuan Lang, the man Marong favored most. When he saw me, his eyes lit up as if he'd found some rare treasure. He walked over quickly, his voice soft and gentle. Oh my, is this Lord Mo? I've heard so much about you. Quote, His Majesty has mentioned your name countless times. With you here, the foundation of our great Li is truly as stable as a rock. Quote.
I didn't look up and continued eating my noodles. Yuan Lang was stunned. In the capital, he was a man in high demand. Even high-ranking officials would greet him with a polite smile, and lower-ranking ones would even offer him gifts. He didn't expect the general to ignore him. His expression flickered, but he quickly put on a smile again and leaned in closer. Quote, Lord Mo, don't be so cold to me. I just wanted to get to know you, so that I can put in a good word for you before His Majesty later. Quote,
I finally put down my chopsticks, not because I wanted to engage with him, but because he was standing too close. The scent of powder on him was drilling straight into my nose, seriously ruining my appetite for the noodles. I looked up at him, and Yuan Lang seemed a bit unsettled by my gaze. Having fought the northern barbarians for 7 years, my eyes naturally held a touch of murderous intent. Quote, what is your name? Yuan Lang's eyes lit up again, thinking I was finally willing to acknowledge him, and he hurriedly replied,
I am His Majesty's own. Quote,
I know who you are, I interrupted. Quote, I asked, what skills do you possess? Yuan Lang was stunned. I am somewhat skilled in music and adept at.
Not that. I stood up. I was a full head taller than him, and he instinctively tilted his head back to look at me, his smile stiffening. Quote, I'm asking, by what right do you stand before me and speak? Have you ever fought in a war? Have you ever killed anyone? Do you know how cold the winters are on the northern frontier? Do you know how many of my men have died to protect this country? Yuan Lang's complexion changed entirely, his lips trembling. You have done nothing. You just have a pretty face that caught his majesty's eye. And for that, you dare to bicker in front of me? His face turned from white to red, then to purple. He finally managed to squeeze out a sentence. Prince Mo, your words are too excessive. Although I am not a military officer, I am still someone close to his majesty.
I slapped him across the face, not using too much strength. With my strength, if I had used any more force, his neck would have snapped, but it certainly wasn't a light tap either. Yuan Lang spun halfway around from the slap. A bright red handprint instantly appeared on his delicate face, and blood even trickled out. He covered his face, looking at me with total disbelief.
You actually dare to hit me. You talk too much. You're just a male favorite. How dare you be so noisy in front of me? Slapping you today is me giving you face. If I see you again, it won't just be a slap. Get out. Quote.
Yuan Lang scrambled away. I thought that was the end of it, since in my eyes, he was just a male favorite. I'm Prince Mo, commander of 800,000 troops, and the top-ranked general personally appointed by the late emperor. If I slap him, he should be thanking me, but I underestimated two things. First, Yuan Lang's pillow talk was more powerful than I imagined. A month later, this imperial edict chased me all the way to Hulao. Returning to the capital? How ridiculous. To demand that I, who hold 800,000 troops, surrender my military power for the sake of a male favorite? How absurd. Marong Huan, you really are that headstrong girl your father spoke of. But he failed to mention one other thing. Headstrong people also die quickly. Quote, Your Highness, military advisor Sima Zhao and the various generals have arrived. Quote, my personal guard reported from outside the tent. I told them to enter the tent. At once, a dozen people filed in. Leading them was the military advisor, Sima Zhao. Sima Zhao is in his early 30s, lean and pale, looking like a frail scholar, but in reality, he is the most devious, no, the most ingenious person under my command. Behind Sima Zhao were 12 generals. Vanguard General Wang Wu, 35. Deputy General Zhao Xie, in his early 40s, steady and seasoned, a man of few words, but every word hits the mark. He is the anchor of the army. When I am away, he handles all military affairs. Cavalry Commander Sun Lai, 28, a master of horsemanship. Heavy Cavalry Commander Han Tai, 32, who bears a scar from forehead to chin, a souvenir from a northern barbarian saber. He survived, and the remaining 8 generals, all of whom have crawled out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. These men were not assigned to me by the imperial court. I handpicked them one by one, and they answer only to me. Quote, I'm sure you have all heard about today's matters, I said, getting straight to the point. Wang Wu was the first to explode.
I heard about it. Damn it. The emperor is being completely unreasonable. Just because the prince slapped an effeminate male favorite, he wants the prince to surrender his military command? I, Wang Wu, am the first to say I won't accept it.
Zhao glared at him. Watch your language. What language? Isn't that just the truth? We've risked our lives for 7 years in the north, and so many brothers have died. Just to be met with this piece of crap imperial decree? Don't let this break the brothers' hearts. Exactly. What even is that male favorite? Just a piece of trash in the capital who makes a living off his face. Does he deserve for our prince to apologize to him? Pan Tai said nothing, but his hand gripping the sword hilt tightened slightly. I scanned the room. Everyone's stance was clear. Not a single person thought we should accept this. That was within my expectations. The Mo army was raised by my own hands. I waved my hand, and the crowd fell silent. I stood up from my seat, walked to the center, bent down to pick up a fragment of the imperial decree from the floor, and held it up for everyone to see. Quote, Gentlemen, the late emperor showed me great favor. I remember that grace. So no matter how the imperial court has treated the Mo army these past 7 years, I have endured it. Military pay was owed for 3 years, so I paid it out of my own pocket. Promotion lists were suppressed for 2 years, and I told the brothers to wait a little longer. Those scholars in the capital called me a warlord and a threat to the throne, but I couldn't be bothered to respond. But today, this imperial decree tells me that in Marong Huan's heart, the lives and dignity of our 800,000 soldiers are worth less than his favorite toy. Quote, quote, quote. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of every general in the room changed. They didn't turn angry, they turned cold. Men tempered on the battlefield, when they truly intend to kill, do not fly into a rage. They become very quiet and cold, like the sky before a storm.
The late emperor entrusted me with the emperor's care on his deathbed. My voice dropped. I am willing to look after him, but I am not his dog. I drew my long sword and smashed the desk in front of me with one blow. Wood chips flew everywhere, and the desk split into 2 pieces. Since the emperor is young and misled by treacherous sycophants, leading to such foolish acts, and with villains reigning in the court while the loyal are persecuted, I will lead the army south to clear the traitors and purge the chaos. Are you all willing to follow me? Quote.
There was silence for 3 seconds, then Wang Wu was the first to step out and kneel on one knee.
General Wang Wu is willing to follow the prince through fire and water. Quote.
Zhao Xian followed right after.
General Zhao Xian is ready to serve the prince's cause. Quote.
Sun Lai clasped his fists.
The cavalry is ready to fight at any time. Han Tai remained silent, merely unsheathing his blade 3 inches before sliding it back, causing the 8 generals to kneel in unison.
We are willing to follow your highness to purge the court and rid the realm of chaos. I nodded and turned to Sima Zhao. The strategist hadn't spoken since the beginning, merely leaning against a tent pole with his arms crossed, watching everything with a faint smile. Quote, Strategist, what are your thoughts? Sima Zhao straightened up, walked leisurely to the center of the tent, pulled a scroll of parchment from his sleeve, and spread it on the ground. Your Highness, I have already mapped out the route. I looked down. On the map, a red line marked the complete route from Hulao to the capital. The troop deployments, grain reserves, and terrain of every city along the way were clearly noted. Quote, when did you prepare this? I raised an eyebrow. 3 months ago, ever since His Majesty ascended the throne, I knew this day would come. I just didn't expect the spark to be so absurd. He paused and added, to be honest, this trigger is indeed a bit ridiculous. A low rumble of laughter spread through the tent, and I chuckled along. Then tell me, how exactly shall we fight? The military council lasted all night. In the end, I left 150,000 soldiers to guard Hulao under Zhao Xian's command. Although the northern army was crippled, a camel dead is still larger than a horse. One cannot be careless. The remaining 350,000 troops were divided into 3 wings. I personally led the 280,000 infantry in the center, marching directly toward the capital. Lai Shuai led 50,000 cavalry as the vanguard, scouting ahead and clearing the path, while Han Tai commanded 20,000 heavy infantry as the rear guard. Sima Zhao stayed by my side as strategist. Before departing, I did 2 things. First, I wrote a proclamation to the world. The letter was drafted by Sima Zhao, written with brilliant eloquence. It stated that the current emperor is young and misled by treacherous sycophants, leaving the court in turmoil. As a prince entrusted with a decree by the late emperor, I have no choice but to rise in arms to purge the court, seeking only to restore justice, with no ulterior motives. Whether this excuse works is secondary. The key is to have a righteous banner. There have been thousands of rebels throughout history, but not one claimed they were rebelling. Everyone says they are purging the court. They just purge and purge until the emperor is replaced. Second, I gathered all 800,000 troops on the Hulao Pass drill field and publicly read the contents of the imperial decree. to surrender command of the Northern Army and apologize to the one who had been humiliated by the Emperor in front of the whole world. As I read that line, the training grounds erupted in absolute chaos. What? The prince has to apologize to a male concubine? On what grounds? Are the battles we fought with our lives just to save a male concubine's face?
I, Liu San, lost an arm on the battlefield, and that gigolo hasn't even touched the blade. Why should our prince bow his head to him? The roar of 800,000 men converged, shaking the very walls of Hulao Pass. Wang Wu stepped forward, waving his fist and shouting, "Brothers, the imperial court doesn't treat us like men. If that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite. We're following the prince. We request to mobilize." 350,000 soldiers roared, a wave of sound so high it seemed capable of shattering the ice. Many veterans drew their swords on the spot, showing their resolve. Blood and tears mingled together, dripping onto the cold stone floor of Hulao Pass. I stood on the command platform watching this scene. 7 years ago, I traveled to this world, all alone, with no name to my credit. Now, 800,000 iron troops roar for me, and 350,000 soldiers are willing to die for me. This is my. Now, 800,000 iron troops roar for me, and 350,000 soldiers are willing to die for me. This is the empire I have forged in this world, and no one will take it from my hands.
The moment the order was given, the earth trembled. 350,000 troops headed south. Do you understand what that means? Looking down from the heights, a torrent of iron armor flowed from Hulao Pass, endless and unbroken, stretching like a dragon and rising like clouds. The sound of hooves and marching feet merged into one, like the heartbeat of the earth. The people along the way stood by the roadside watching the army pass, their expressions not of fear, but of anticipation. The people of the north have suffered too much over these years. Although I drove the northern barbarians away, the court's tyranny never ceased. After Rong Huan took the throne, the noble families in the capital became even more ruthless, piling on taxes and levies, leaving the people in misery. In the 7 years I've been in the north, I exempted taxes in every region where the northern army was stationed and used military rations to feed the people, which is why the northern folk trust me, not the emperor. Along the way, we faced almost no real resistance. The garrison commanders either surrendered immediately or fled the cities. It's not just that they feared me, though they certainly did, but mostly because their soldiers had no will to fight. Fight the Northern Army? Are you joking? That is the strongest army in the world. On the 5th day of the march, Sima Zhao came to see me, a hesitant, conflicted look on his face. Quote, "Strategist, just say what you have to say. Your Highness, there's a matter that requires your cooperation." "What is it?" Quote. Sima Zhao pulled a tattered white flag from his sleeve, with 8 large characters written on it. Quote, "Where did you get this?" Quote, "I had it made. I plan to bury it in the Northern River and have someone, accidentally, discover it. Your Highness, don't look at me like that. This trick may be old, but it works. The people need a reason to believe in our mandate. Relying on the army alone isn't enough. We need a touch of mystery. Isn't this a bit too absurd?" In the Chen Sheng and Wu Guang era, it was even more absurd. Stuffing cloth into a fish's belly, foxes calling out at midnight, but it was effective. 1,000 years later, this routine still works. Quote, "Suit yourself." Thus, on the 7th day, a one-eyed stone statue was discovered in the Northern River, 3 jong tall, inscribed with, "When the one-eyed man appears, the world shall rise in revolt." The news spread, and the people whispered that this was a sign from heaven. The empress had lost her virtue, and the world was destined to change. On the 9th day, a hunter on the northern mountain heard a fox howling and caught a large fish in a nearby pond. Upon opening the fish, he found a scroll inside. Once the news broke, the people along the way were stirred to excitement, welcoming us with open arms, offering food and water, and even young men followed our army to enlist. I watched the lively scene from my horse and couldn't help but look at Sima Zhao, who smiled with an "I told you it would work" expression. I shook my head and said nothing. Although the methods were indeed a bit cliché, this star power was sometimes more useful than 100,000 troops. By the 12th day of the march, with only 4 days left to the capital, Rong Huan finally couldn't sit still and sent 2 men, Left Chancellor Wei Yan and Right Chancellor Feng Shou-jung. Both were in their 70s, veteran officials with deep seniority in the court. Their purpose was simple, to persuade me to withdraw. I met them in the main tent that afternoon. The 2 old chancellors arrived with quite a grand display, surrounded by a dozen attendants, even bringing a chessboard and a zither. Quote, "Prince, it has been a while. I have come all the way from the capital specifically to catch up with you, Prince. Indeed, you've fought in the north for 7 years. Prince, it's been hard. I brought a pot of fine wine to share with you." Quote, the 2 sang in harmony, acting as friendly and amiable as if they were just visiting relatives. Quote, "Prime Ministers, you have traveled far. You must be tired. Please, sit." After the 2 men sat down, Wei Yannian spoke up. As he spoke, he took a chessboard from his attendant and set it slowly on the table. Quote, "Your Highness, the Emperor was furious when he heard of your actions in the capital, but he is merciful and does not wish to meet you on the battlefield. We have come here specifically to have a productive discussion with you. I know a little about chess. Why don't we chat while we play? If you can beat me, I am willing to intercede on your behalf before His Majesty." Feng Shou-jung also took an ancient zither from his attendant and gently stroked the strings.
I also know a bit about music. Why don't you play a tune? If your skill can convince me, I am also willing to put in a good word for you. I watched them in silence for 5 seconds, then laughed. "Prime Ministers, are you being serious?" "Naturally, we are serious." Wei Yannian, thinking he had moved me, nodded hastily. "You traveled here from the capital with 350,000 troops right to my doorstep, and now you want to talk to me about chess and music?" Quote,
Wei Yannian, Feng Shou-jung, back when the former emperor was alive. What kind of people were you? I remember clearly. When the northern barbarians invaded, you were the ones who insisted on peace and almost gave away the 13 northern provinces.
When I was risking my life against the barbarians, you were the ones in court calling me a warmonger who wastes resources. My supplies were delayed for 3 years because you kept blocking them. Now that Rong Huan is in power, you come to play chess and talk music with me. Do you think I am the type to be fooled by a board game or a melody? Or do you think your heads have been on your shoulders too long and you don't want them anymore?
The faces of the 2 old prime ministers turned from rosy to ashen.
Your Highness, we came with good intentions to advise you. I do not need your advice. Go back and tell Rong Huan that my army is already on the way. The gates of the capital can be opened by you, or I can have them opened by my siege rams. The difference between the 2 is that the former will cost fewer lives. As for the 2 of you, I picked up my wine cup. Guards! As soon as the words left my lips, the tent flap opened, and a dozen guards rushed in. Wei Yannian and Feng Shou-jung were so startled they nearly fell off their chairs. Quote, the two prime ministers are of advanced age and weary from their journey. Take them away and treat them well. I paused, then added, as for the extent of that treatment, use your best judgment. Just don't be too gentle. The guards exchanged glances and smiled in tacit understanding. Prince Mo, how dare you? Quote.
As they were dragged out, the two prime ministers screamed until their throats were raw, but it was no use. Just then, an unexpected person stepped forward. A young man in his early 20s from left Prime Minister Wei Yannian's entourage.
Prince Mo, both prime ministers are elderly and frail, and have unfortunately fallen ill today. Everyone in the command tent was stunned. I looked at him and asked, who are you? Quote.
I am Wei Qingyun, the illegitimate son of left Prime Minister Wei Yannian and a concubine. Quote. Are you cleaning up the mess your father left behind? Quote.
I'm merely an illegitimate son. Quote.
You are cleaning up your father's mess. Quote. I'm choosing a path of survival for myself. Quote.
You're smarter than your father, I said, patting his shoulder. Quote, you know which way the wind blows. I simply see the situation clearly. You hold 350,000 troops, while the capital has fewer than 100,000. Furthermore, the noble family's private armies are all divided. You are certain to win this war. Since that is the case, rather than dying with the two prime ministers, I would prefer to follow Prince Mobe, perhaps to do something for the empire. I nodded slightly. Get up. From today on, you will follow me. Quote.
Thank you, Prince Mobe. Quote. Wei Qingyun stood up, his eyes gleaming. Sima Zhao leaned in and whispered in my ear, this lad is useful. I know. The army continued south, and by the 14th day, we arrived at a place called Chenchao. Chenchao. I looked at the name on the map, and the corner of my mouth twitched. Sima Zhao also looked at the name, and his mouth twitched too. We exchanged a glance, neither of us speaking. This was too much of a coincidence. That night, the army made camp at Chenchao. I was in the main tent discussing the details of tomorrow's siege with Sima Zhao. We were now only a day's journey from the capital and would be at the city walls by the day after. Just as we were discussing the strategy, a commotion broke out outside. Quote, what is going on? A guard ran in to report, Your Highness, the soldiers are rioting outside. I went out to take a look, and goodness, tens of thousands of soldiers were gathered in front of the main tent. Goodness gracious, tens of thousands of soldiers were gathered in front of the main tent, their torches lighting up the night sky. At the very front were generals like Wang Wu and Sun Lai, and behind them was a vast dark sea of troops. Quote, brothers, the prince is out. Quote, then he turned to the crowd, his voice booming like a bell.
Everyone, the current emperor is incompetent and foolish, willing to dismantle our military just for a favored concubine. What have we seen on our march south? The people are displaced and destitute, with corpses littering the land. This is the world ruled by that so-called emperor. But look at our prince. For 7 years, he has fought bloody battles alongside us, recovered 13 northern prefectures, and never once mistreated a single brother in arms. This is the true wise ruler. My prince, the mandate rests with you. Please ascend the throne and lead us in building a true golden age. Tens of thousands of people knelt in unison. I took a deep breath. It was finally here. The play Sima Zhao orchestrated had finally reached its climax. Although I knew this was coming, having tens of thousands of people kneel before you, their sincere faces and burning eyes illuminated by the firelight, to say I wasn't moved would be a lie. I raised my hand, signaling everyone to rise, and said with a solemn expression, absolutely not. I am far inferior to the current emperor. This southward march is merely to clear the court of evil influences. You must all abandon such thoughts. Quote.
My first rejection was expected. Rules still had to be followed. Sima Zhao immediately stepped forward to make the second plea, appearing deeply emotional.
My prince, the current emperor cannot distinguish right from wrong, causing chaos across the realm. There are many wise men in the world, but you are the only one who can save it. Please, for the sake of the common people, follow the mandate of heaven. I declined once again. There are many talented scholars in the world. How could a mere warrior like me shoulder such a burden? Wei Qingyun then stepped forward. The lad learned quickly, and respectfully made the third plea. The people are suffering in fire and water. You are the destination of the mandate and the hope of the masses. If you, prince, continue to refuse, where will the world's commoners go? Quote.
I sighed, wearing a look of pain and reluctance.
Since you all show such great affection, if I were to decline again, I would be failing the expectations of the people. Quote.
Before I even finished speaking, Sima Zhao produced a yellow robe from behind him, stepped forward quickly, and draped it over my shoulders.
Hail to your majesty. Tens of thousands of people shouted in unison, the sound soaring to the heavens. I lowered my head to look at the yellow robe on my body.
How did this yellow robe end up on me? You all have really wronged me. I am a loyal subject. Both inside and outside the tent, from Sima Zhao to Wang Wu, and from Sun Lai to Han Tai, everyone was struggling desperately to keep from laughing. Wang Wu was laughing so hard he was slapping his thigh, stopping only after receiving a fierce glare from Zhao Xian. My acting was a bit over the top, but it didn't matter. Tomorrow, the capital would be right before our eyes. One morning, our vast army marched toward the capital. Mounted on my tall, powerful steed, I gazed into the distance at the city's silhouette. 6 zhang high and 3 zhang thick, the walls had remained unconquered for 200 years. Army, heed my command. Form ranks. At the order, our 350,000 troops began to move like a well-oiled machine. 280,000 infantrymen deployed into squares before the city, as precise as if measured by ruler, while 20,000 heavy cavalry took their positions at the rear. Marang Huan appeared on the ramparts, draped in his imperial dragon robes, seated upon a throne hastily moved to the tower. I could see the facade of forced composure on his refined face. Standing beside him was that man pet, Yuan Lang. Though his face remained impossibly beautiful, his expression was clearly strained with tension.
Audacious subject. Marang Huan spoke only 2 words before stopping abruptly. Quote, audacious traitor. You murdered the left and right prime ministers, killed my imperial envoys, and now openly threaten the city with your troops. What is it that you truly want? Quote.
Your majesty, pray, calm your anger. My march south is no rebellion, but a quest to purge the court. Since your ascension, you have been misled by villains. The court has withered, and loyal subjects have been cast aside. I cannot bear to watch the imperial legacy crumble, so I have no choice but to purge the sycophants by your side. My tone was earnest and sincere. There are no sycophants here. Those beside me are all loyal ministers. It is you, a subordinate who defies orders and threatens the throne, who is the true traitor. Quote.
Yuan Lang hurriedly chimed in. Exactly. His Majesty is merciful and spared your life, kindly sending the prime ministers to persuade you, yet you were ungrateful and murdered them both. You are a wretch. I drew my bow. From an archer's perspective, shooting at someone on the ramparts from 100 paces away is notoriously imprecise, but I am no ordinary archer. Over the past 7 years, I have struck down more than 30 enemy generals on the battlefield, the furthest being a Bilu commander I shot through the throat from 200 paces while mounted. The sound of the bowstring rang out with striking clarity in the silence. The arrow took flight, covering the distance in less than a single breath. Yuan Lang didn't even have time to react before it pierced his throat. His voice cut off instantly. His body stiffened for a moment. Then, like a puppet with its string severed, he slowly collapsed backward. The city tower fell into a death deathly silence. Even Maranghuan was stunned, blankly staring down at Yuan Lang lying at his feet, watching as the face that once haunted his dreams slowly lost all its color. It was not sorrow, but rage, a rage bordering on madness.
Subject.
He smashed the armrest of the throne with a single palm. I will have your entire clan executed, I replied calmly from atop my horse. Your Majesty, I have no clan. Maranghuan's rage nearly set the watchtower ablaze, but after all, having been emperor for 3 years, he quickly regained a shred of reason. The capital had 100,000 guards. After his outburst, he quickly regained a shred of reason. The capital had 100,000 guards, 100,000 against 350,000. A direct confrontation was impossible, but holding the city would make stalling for months no problem at all. As long as they could hold out until reinforcements from the surrounding borders arrived, the situation could be reversed. But just then, someone stepped forward, walked quickly to Marang, and bowed respectfully. Maranghuan looked at him. It was the Imperial Guard officer, he, who said, Your Majesty, I have a plan to crush the rebels with minimal cost. Speak. Quote.
Your Majesty, I know a Taoist master who is well versed in heavenly secrets. He possesses an ultimate technique called the 6-Ding-6 Jaw Infinity Formation. Once formed, it can turn 7,777 soldiers into heavenly warriors, impervious to blades. Not only 350,000 rebels, but even 1,000,000 men could not stop them. Quote. Is this true? Quote.
It is absolutely true. That Taoist is here in the city. With your command, he can set the formation immediately. Go quickly and bring him to perform the magic. There will be a heavy reward upon success. About 15 minutes later, an old man dressed in robes with a celestial aura was brought up to the watchtower. On the tower, he went through a series of rituals, chanting spells and burning talismans, putting on quite a show. Then Maranghuan ordered the mobilization of 7,777 guards to leave the city and form the ranks. The city gates swung wide, and nearly 8,000 men followed Guo Jin's instructions to set up a strange formation outside the city walls. The soldiers were quite diligent. After all, Guo Jin had told them that once the formation was complete, they would be invulnerable to weapons. On the watchtower, Guo Jin finished his final gesture, threw a talisman off the wall, and pointed his wooden peach sword at the 8,000 men, shouting loudly.
6 jaw spirits, appear. Quote.
After finishing all this, he turned to Marang and said,
Your Majesty, the formation is complete. These soldiers are now heavenly warriors. You may order them to attack. Quote.
Excitement flashed in Marang's eyes as he shouted the order.
Soldiers, advance and kill the rebels. Great rewards await those who earn merit. Quote.
Nearly 8,000 men cheered in unison, their momentum truly formidable, and then they charged with their weapons toward the 350,000 enemy troops. I watched this scene from horseback, then turned to look at Sima Zhou beside me. Sima Zhou was also watching, and we locked eyes. Quote. Strategist, what do you make of this? Quote. It's like handing us a meal. I think the same. Release the arrows. Borrow the power of the sky. The rain of arrows fell, without a shadow of suspense. 8,000 men were exposed on the open, shelterless plain, facing the elite archers the Mo army had trained for 7 years. Half fell after the first volley, and another 30% after the second. The survivors finally realized they were no match, so they began to flee. Wang Wu scoffed from the side.
I thought they were strong, so this is that so-called limitless formation. I'd call it the limitless death wish formation. The Mo soldiers also let out a collective burst of mockery, the intention self-evident. Mo Rongwan's. The Mo soldiers also let out a collective burst of mockery. The intention of the mockery was self-evident. Mo Rong's expression had turned hideously ugly. He turned his gaze toward the ashen-faced, trembling Guo Qing.
Guards, drag this fraud away and execute him, along with Hiru, who recommended him. Quote.
No, Your Majesty, give me one more chance. Quote.
Your Majesty, have mercy. Your Majesty, please listen to my explanation. Quote.
2 screens quickly faded away, but the problem was the gate remained open, and I wouldn't let this opportunity slip. Quote. Full army, advance. Strike now. The Mo army surged toward the gates like a flood breaking through a levee. Close the gates. Quickly, but it was already too late. Wang Wu led the Wind Battalion into the gatehouse first, brandishing his blade and cutting down the guards struggling to close the doors. Right behind them were Sun Lai's heavy cavalry, their iron hooves trampling through the gate like they were entering an empty space. The capital's 100,000 guards had no power to resist the Mo army. It wasn't that they couldn't fight, but that they didn't want to. Half of the 100,000 guards were private troops of the aristocratic families, each harboring their own secret agendas. The Mo army poured into the capital like a black torrent. Iron hooves shattered the bluestone pavement, and banners obscured half the sky. But the orders I gave were strict. No killing those who surrender, no harming civilians, no plundering people's property. Disobey, and you will be executed. These 3 iron rules were carved into the bones of the Mo army from the very first day they were raised. In less than 2 hours, the palace was surrounded, and after another half hour, the palace gates were forced. Mo Huan and all his civil and military officials were captured. There was no large-scale slaughter during the process. In fact, the heaviest casualties were those 8,000 poor souls whom Guo Qing had hoodwinked into walking out there. After taking the capital, my biggest trouble wasn't Maranghuan, but those noble families and grand clans. He has been placed under house arrest. I haven't mistreated him. I've put him in a side hall in the inner palace, keeping his lifestyle as it was, just restricting his freedom. What really gives me a headache are the representatives of those noble families in the imperial court. While Maranghuan was in power, to gain the support of these families, he granted them massive privileges, 5 years of tax exemption, priority in civil service exams, and partial judicial immunity. Now that they see Maranghuan has fallen, their first reaction isn't fear, but anxiety. Do our privileges still exist? The coronation ceremony hasn't even been held yet, and these people are already rushing to pledge their loyalty. Quote, General Chen should be addressed as Your Majesty. Our Gongsun family has been loyal for generations. Our Wang clan as well, but our benefits. Our Lu family has served the court for ages, but regarding the tax reduction issue, I sat on the newly polished dragon throne, listening to these noble representatives going back and forth. Gentlemen, I have understood everything you've said. Expectant looks appeared on the faces of the noble representatives. My answer is no. Tax exemptions, cancelled. Priority in exams, cancelled. Judicial immunity, cancelled. From this day on, noble families and commoners will be treated as equals.
Your Majesty, you can't do this. Our families have lasted for centuries. Taxes should be paid, and laws must be followed. So what if it's been 100 years? For 100 years, you've eaten grain grown by the commoners, worn cloth woven by them, and lived in houses built by them. Yet you pay no taxes, serve no military duty, and demand priority in education. In the end, when the enemy invades, who is out there fighting for your lives? It is my soldiers, those mud-legged peasants you look down upon.
And now you come to me to negotiate terms? The Gongsun representative turned pale with rage and stood up abruptly. Your Majesty, if you do this, are you not afraid that all the noble families in the world will unite against you? Quote, and if you do unite, what then? My voice suddenly turned cold. Quote, rebellion. How many soldiers do you have? The Gongsun representative's mouth hung open. He had no soldiers. No noble family possessed a military force capable of contending with my army. Before, they didn't need soldiers because the emperor needed their money and connections, but the man sitting on the dragon throne now does not. I will say this again. Play it straight. Let's work together to make this country better. For those who want to stir up trouble, a dozen heavily armed Mo soldiers stormed into the hall. Quote, take those who refuse to cooperate to the side and have a good chat with them. Yes, your majesty, you, our Gongsun family will never surrender. 7 or 8 representatives of the noble families were dragged out. The remaining people turned pale. The hall was filled with a deathly silence. Soon, screams echoed from the direction of the side hall. The faces of the remaining representatives in the hall changed. I picked up my teacup, blew on the tea leaves slowly, took a sip, and asked, does anyone else have any objections? No one spoke. After settling the business with the noble families, it was already late at night. I went to see Marong Huan alone. Any objections? No one spoke. After handling the affairs of the noble families, it was already deep into the night. I went alone to the side hall where Marong Huan was being held under house arrest. Inside, the lights were bright. Everything was as it had been. The jade incense burner was still burning, and the staff were instructed to provide for him according to his former standards. Aside from his freedom, he lacked nothing. When I pushed open the door, Marong Huan was sitting on the couch by the window. He was still wearing that imperial robe. Seeing me enter, his body visibly tensed, but he did not stand up. He remained seated there with his back straight, chin tilted, looking at me with a condescending gaze. Even as a captive, the arrogance in his bones had not dissipated. Quote, Your Majesty. I cupped my hands in a salute. The title, Your Majesty, made Marong Huan's eyes flicker. He hadn't expected me to call him that, but he immediately let out a cold laugh.
What are you here for? To mock me, or to force me to write an abdication decree? Quote.
Neither. I came to have a chat with you. Quote.
I have nothing to talk to you about. You do. I looked into his eyes. In the dim candlelight, his features were truly refined, and paired with the dragon robe, he possessed a sharp beauty. But his eyes were red, whether from anger or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. Quote, Marong Huan. I addressed him by his given name, and his body tensed again. I ask you, what did your father say when he was dying? Marong Huan's expression changed.
You know what he said? Quote.
He took my hand and asked me to take care of you. The hall fell silent for a few seconds.
He said you are stubborn, but your heart is not evil, and asked me to bear with you. Quote, Marong Huan's lips moved, as if he wanted to say something, but he said nothing at all. Do you know why I endured for 3 years in the capital? I leaned back against the chair. Military funding was delayed for 3 years. I didn't fuss. My promotion was held back for 2 years. I didn't fuss. The court officials insulted me. I didn't fuss. Because I gave your father my word. But what you did today, forcing me to surrender my military power and apologize publicly for a mere pet. Do you know what that means?
Marong Huan bit his lip, saying nothing.
It means you have trampled my 7 years of patience, the dignity of 800,000 soldiers, and the trust the people of the 13 provinces have in me. For the sake of a pet's pride, how could you expect me to endure this?
Marong Huan finally spoke, his voice faint and desperate.
Yuan Lang is not just a pet. He is the only one by my side without an ulterior motive.
I was silent for a few seconds, then said, You're wrong. He has motives. You're lying. Quote, The reason those around you aren't trustworthy isn't that they all have motives, but because you can't tell who does and who doesn't. Your father could tell the difference, but you can't. That is the real problem. Marong Huan's eyes turned red. He bit his lip hard, refusing to cry. I stood up. Quote, I won't kill you. Marong Huan looked up at me. I remember your father's kindness, and I can't bring myself to kill you either, but you can no longer hold this throne. From tomorrow on, the surname of this empire will change. From tomorrow on, this empire will no longer belong to the Marong line. I turned and walked toward the door. When I reached it, I paused without looking back. Quote, Your father asked me to look after you, and I will, but the way I look after you will be up to me. Stay safe. Your life ahead won't be too difficult. The door closed behind me. 3 days later, the coronation ceremony was held in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, with 350,000 Mo army soldiers, cheers piercing the capital sky. I sat on the dragon throne, wearing a brand new Imperial dragon robe, crowned in majesty. Frankly, this thing is quite heavy, but sitting in this position, it doesn't feel good or bad. It just feels very real. 7 years ago, when I transmigrated into this world, I was a penniless youth facing a war-torn capital and 400,000 ironclad troops. 7 years later, I sit at the pinnacle of this world. What separates the king of Mobei from the emperor is not luck, but 7 years of blood and bones. After ascending the throne, the first thing I did was to bestow rewards. I appointed Sima Zhao as chancellor to oversee state affairs. Given his talent, no one else is better suited for this position. I named Wang Wu the general of the state. This reckless brute may not be the brightest, but when it comes to charging into battle, he is unrivaled. I appointed Zhao Xian as the great general of the north to continue guarding the northern border. Someone must keep an eye on those who haven't given up yet. I promoted Sun Lai to general of the vanguard and Han Tai to general of iron. Based on their merits, the officers and soldiers were all rewarded, from counts to marquises. No one was left out. I promoted Qing Yun to minister of revenue. Though young, he has a sharp mind. I wanted to gain experience by starting with the treasury for a few years. As for Marong Huan, I titled him the Duke of Anil and confined him to the Chongla Palace. This title sounds pleasant, but it is effectively just a fancy name for continued house arrest. I haven't mistreated him, though. The Chongla Palace is as grand as any imperial residence, and he lacks for nothing. He just can't leave. After the appointments, the second thing I did was reform. This is what truly matters. The privileges of noble families were abolished, tax exemptions were cancelled, the imperial examinations were restored to ensure fair competition, and everyone was made equal before the law. This stroke of the blade severed the very roots upon which the noble families depended for survival. Many families made covert moves, colluding to incite scholars and even attempting to bribe the northern generals, but they were all thwarted by Sima Zhao. Those who needed to be arrested were arrested, and those who needed to be killed were killed. My stance is clear. Those who obey stay, and those who don't, I wouldn't mind wiping out their entire clans. Once these words got out, the remaining noble families grew much quieter. Some scholars also refused to submit, writing articles branding me a usurping warlord and a treacherous rebel. My approach was simple. You write your words, I do my work. Insults cannot change reality. The people's lives have improved. There's more food, taxes are lower, roads are repaired, and schools have been built. Time will prove who is right and who is wrong. Of course, there were those who went too far. A few wrote things clearly intended to incite public riots. Such behavior could not be tolerated. Arrest those who must be arrested, kill those who must be killed. I am no tyrant, but I am certainly no weakling. Days turned into months, and under my governance, the great Shah began to move toward prosperity. The court has become much more transparent. The reforms led by Sima Zhao are effective, and the imperial examinations have brought in a group of truly talented people, replacing the useless aristocrats who only held their positions through nepotism. Economically, after abolishing the tax-exempt privileges of the noble families, treasury revenue doubled. I used the surplus funds for two things: the military and public infrastructure. By dredging canals and promoting agriculture, the people's lives visibly improved. Militarily, Zhao Xian did well in the north, and the northern Lu forces launched 2 probing attacks. Both were repelled, and everything was trending in a positive direction, except for one thing: Marong Huan. He had been kept in the Chongla Palace for 3 months. At first, he was very stubborn, refusing to eat or drink for 3 days, trying to force me to let him out. My way of dealing with it was to have YouTube prepare a table of his favorite dishes to send over, then leave him be. 3 days later, he ate on his own. After all, fasting is truly difficult for a 21-year-old girl to keep up. Then, he switched to the silent treatment. Every time I went to Chongla Palace, he wouldn't say a word, just sat there staring at me with eyes full of hatred. I didn't mind. I didn't go to Chongla Palace to hear him talk, but to check if there were any issues with his confinement. He wanted me to take care of him, so I provided for him, and despite his silence, everything continued until one day. That day, after I finished reviewing the memorials, I went to Chongla Palace to see him. When I opened the door, I found Marong Huan wasn't sitting by the window as usual. He was standing in the center of the room, with a large sheet of paper spread across the table, covered in drawings. I stepped closer and saw it was a map, not just a sketch, but a precise map of the Great Shah territory, with mountains, rivers, cities, and passes clearly marked. even more detailed than the one I used in the military. Did you draw this? Your northern defense line has flaws. Placing Zhao Xian at Hulao Pass is correct, but the defense of the Liangzhou corridor to the west is too weak. If the northern Lu breaks through there, they can directly threaten the Guanzhong plain. I looked down closely at the locations he marked, and then I fell silent, because what he said was absolutely correct. The Liangzhou corridor was indeed a weak point in our defenses. I hadn't noticed before because the northern Lu had always attacked head-on and lacked the strength to outflank us, but from a topographical analysis, the possibility definitely exists. How did you figure this out?
Among the military books left by the former emperor, there is one called A Study of Northern Defenses, which mentions the strategic value of the Liangzhou corridor. I read it back when I was emperor.
He spoke the words, being an emperor, in a tone so flat, almost deliberately so, that I sat down across from him and continued. You need to listen. Marang Huan looked up, somewhat surprised. Quote, if what you're saying is right, why wouldn't I listen? Marang Huan paused for a moment, then lowered his head to continue marking the map. His voice no longer carried the previous resentment and wariness, but had shifted into something he himself didn't even realize.
Besides the Liangzhou corridor,
It had shifted into something he himself didn't even realize. Besides the Liangzhou corridor, there are also issues in the East Sea. Recent reports suggest an island nation overseas has begun harassing fishermen along the coast. We talked for 2 hours that night, and the entire conversation was about the state of the nation. As I was leaving, I paused at the door. Quote, your father said your heart wasn't bad. It seems he was right. You just used your talents in the wrong places before. Marang Huan didn't speak, but as I closed the door, I saw in my peripheral vision the corner of his mouth twitch. I couldn't be sure if it was a smile or something else, but from that day on, my visits to Changla Palace became more frequent, not to look after him, but because his understanding of military and political affairs was much deeper than I had imagined. The late emperor was no mediocre ruler. He left his daughter more than just a throne. He left her with a wealth of statecraft, but Marang had previously been blinded by those noble plans and favorites, failing to apply what she had learned. Now that those distractions are gone, what remains is a truly intelligent, talented young person who still needs room to grow. He is no longer my enemy. He could be a great advisor, or even more. 8 months after the founding of the Daxia dynasty, trouble emerged in the East Sea. An overseas island nation dispatched hundreds of warships to invade Daxia's east coast, burning, killing, and looting, stopping at nothing. The people in 3 coastal commanderies suffered. Dozens of fishing villages were ransacked, boats were burned, men were slaughtered, and women were abducted. The locals called this group the Woku. When the news reached the capital, I was in the Yushu Pavilion reviewing memorials. When Sima Zhao handed over the military report, his expression was rarely solemn. Quote, Your Majesty, the situation in the East Sea is not good. I finished reading the report and slammed it onto the table. Then, I stood up and walked to the massive map on the wall, toward the position of that island nation off the East Sea coast. Sima Zhao replied, 50,000 elite troops and 300 warships. Your Majesty, we must strike back, not just defend or expel them. We must strike back, carry the war to their homeland, and let them know that those who offend our great Shah, no matter how far away, shall be destroyed. Sima Zhao looked into my eyes and smiled, saying, I will arrange it at once. But to everyone's surprise, including Sima Zhao's, as soon as my decision was announced, the royal court erupted in chaos.
Your Majesty, you cannot. For the emperor to personally lead a campaign against such a tiny island nation is beneath your dignity. Quote, I stood in the court, scanning the assembled officials, and asked, those murdered fishermen were subjects of my great Shah. Is their worth beneath dignity? Those women who were abducted were people of my great Shah. Is their worth beneath dignity? An emperor who cannot even protect his own people. That is what is truly beneath dignity. The court fell silent. The decision was final, and I would lead the expedition. On the eve of the campaign, I went to the Changla Palace. Marang Huan already knew of my plan. You are going yourself? Quote,
that island nation may be small, but naval warfare is different from land warfare. All your battles in the north have been on land. You are unfamiliar with conditions at sea. Quote, that is exactly why I must go. Quote,
Therefore, I must go myself. If I am unfamiliar, I will learn. If I cannot fight, I will learn how to fight. Marang glanced at me, then walked to the table and took out an item. It was a detailed nautical chart of the East Sea he had drawn over the past few days, marking the current directions, the locations of reefs, and the distribution of ports along the island nation's coast.
take this. It might be useful. Quote,
I took the chart, looked at it, and thanked him. As I turned to leave, his voice came from behind, very softly. Quote, you must come back alive. I did not turn back, but the corner of my mouth lifted. Rest assured, not even the king of hell dares to take me. 50,000 soldiers and 300 warships crossed the sea. This was the first large-scale overseas expedition since the founding of our nation. From the coast of Great Shah to that island nation, the fleet sailed for 6 days. On the dawn of the 7th day, as the mist cleared and the silhouette of land appeared on the distant horizon, I stood on the flagship, watching the territory about to be conquered. The chart Marang gave me proved invaluable. Relying on the map marked with reefs and currents, the fleet avoided several dangerous waters and arrived at the island a day ahead of schedule. The nation clearly never expected Great Shah to strike back. In their view, Great Shah was an inland nation, and our navy could not possibly fight across the sea. They were wrong. The navy of Great Shah was indeed weak before, but that was a thing of the Marang Huan era. A month before the expedition, I had Sima Zhao recruit a large number of experienced fishermen and shipwrights from the East Coast to build a navy that was young but possessed fierce combat power. Those 50,000 elite troops were the best of the best, handpicked from the Mobe army. They were the strongest force on land, and after a few days of adjusting at sea, they remained unmatched. Once the landing operations began, the island nation's army was no match at all. Their soldiers were like paper tigers when facing our Mo army's ironclad phalanx. Within a week, all the coastal ports were seized. 5 days later, the Great Shah army pushed deep inland, sweeping through everything in its path and heading straight for the island nation's royal capital. The island's emperor and his generals organized one final defense. For this battle, they mobilized every available soldier, about 30,000 men, and deployed them on the plains outside the capital. 30,000 against 50,000. It might not seem like a large gap, but the actual battle was completely one-sided. The Mo army's armored infantry crushed them from the front, light cavalry flanked them, and heavy cavalry charged from the sides. The 30,000 were routed within an hour. The capital fell, and the emperor and his generals were all captured alive. I stood before the island nation's throne, looking at the trembling emperor kneeling on the ground, and told him, those who offend our great Shah, no matter how far, shall be punished. After the translator relayed this, the emperor began to shake even more violently. Tell him that if the kidnapped great Shah women are not all safely returned within 3 days, destroying his country will only be the beginning. I will wipe out his entire race. 3 days later, all the kidnapped Great Shah people were returned, and the island nation became an overseas territory of Great Shah from that day on. The emperor and his generals were escorted back to the capital and publicly executed in front of the Wu Gate. The people of the 3 coastal prefectures lined the streets to welcome our triumphant army. Old men knelt by the roadside weeping, while young people cheered with pride. Riding on my horse, looking at these smiles and tears, I thought back to when I first arrived in this world 7 years ago. Back then I had nothing, but now I have everything, and I have secured everything for this world. After returning to the capital, I went straight to the Changla Palace without a moment's rest. I pushed open the door to find Marang Huan sitting by the window reading. He looked up, and upon seeing me standing there unscathed, a flicker passed through his eyes. It vanished in an instant, almost too fast to capture.
I'm back.
His voice was faint. Quote, you've returned. Quote,
I won. Quote,
I won. I wiped them all out. Quote,
I knew you would win. Quote,
he lowered his head to read again, as if nothing had happened, but I noticed his hand trembling slightly as he turned the page. I walked in and sat opposite him. Quote, your nautical chart was very useful. Without it, the fleet would have spent at least 2 extra days at sea. Quote, a mere